welcome to Saturday Morning Cartoons, the Collider weekly podcast for all things animation, including reviews and interviews. Crash landing on Earth from the planet Galiluna. I'll be your host, Sean Paul Ellis, and joining me, he is the heart, body, and mind of this show, my co-host, Dave Trombor. David, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good, bud. Heart, body, and mind over here. What part are you playing again?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I mean, I can be any one of the three. So
we're just gonna swap out, I guess.
I mean, I guess, is there just like a third one that we have that we're just like, it's just sort of a vacant position that we put maybe like a job listing up for and have somebody submit?
Like just the bulletin board kind of thing? Do you want to be a soul?
Yeah, sure.
Done. Sean's a soul.
Oh, perfect. Well, I was going to say, this week is a little bit interesting because there's the two of us, but we also have a very special recommendation this week.
We do.
And that could be heart, body, and mind right there.
I like it. Okay, that's better. What's Bobby, though? Can Bobby be the soul?
Yeah, Bobby's the soul.
Okay,
Bobby's
perfect.
The soul.
We figured it out eventually.
Yeah, we got there.
And now we can combine to form the most powerful podcast.
Hopefully, everybody clearly understands what we were able to articulate as the cartoon that we're watching for the show.
Definitely not.
Clearly, we've gotten there so far. We are actually going to be talking about Sym-Bionic Titan.
Yeah.
And this show is very fun because guess what? Dave.
Yeah?
It's a recommendation.
Oh, okay. I thought you just meant like in general it was fun.
Yeah.
But this episode of the podcast is fun because it's a listener recommendation.
Exactly. So we have a listener recommendation. This one here today, Sym-Bionic Titan, this is a recommendation from listener Jesse. Jesse called in, left us a message. So thank you, Jesse. Let's hear from Jesse. Jesse, take it away.
Hi, guys. Big fan. My name's Jesse. I have a suggestion, but I think you guys should review Sym-Bionic Titan. It was a show by Genndy Tartakovsky before the Samurai Jack reboot, before Primal, after Clone Wars. I feel like it's his least known show, but it's totally my favorite. It's kind of like Voltron inspired, teens with a giant robot, but it's really cool. Graphics action is awesome, obviously. So I think you guys will enjoy it. Thanks. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jesse. We always appreciate this. Just to hear you say action in this is awesome. True statement. That's pretty factual.
I will say, too, this is going to be a double recommendation, even though the second one is more unofficial. Former guest on the show and regular contributor over to Collider.com, and just pal of both of us, Rafael Motomayor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he told me to watch Sym-Bionic Titan a long time ago, and we'll talk about why, because it is a Genndy Tartakovsky joint. So if you want to complete your Tartakovsky collection, you need to add Sym-Bionic Titan to that. It may have slipped through the cracks. You may have missed this one, but it's definitely one that's worth watching. Add to your collection.
A lot of you have made recommendations for cartoons that we should watch over social media or in the comments on YouTube. Guess what? We read them, but being able to record them, you don't get the proper shout out that we should give to you.
Right.
So if you want to recommend a cartoon to us, go to the bio of any of our social media accounts, click on our link tree. There's a button there that says you can suggest a cartoon. On that form, if you want to go one step further, you can give us a call, 202-681-4406. This ensures that you get the proper shout out as Jesse did by calling that number. And if you call, we will 100% review your cartoon. Why? We have cartoon lawyers breathing down our necks right now. We have to review these shows that you call in and tell us. They are now taking precedent. I think we have like a handful of them that are queued up right now, ready to go. So if you have called in recently and left a message, get ready. They are up and coming. Why do we do this, Dave? We love to hear what we missed. This is episode 276?
That's right.
We could probably go another 276 and still probably miss a cartoon that you listening right now, love. We want to get to that. We want to know why it was important, why you enjoyed it. And like I said, cartoon lawyers are making us do this, whether we want to or not. So
And we do.
And we do.
Legally.
According to cartoon law, that's how this is going to function.
That's right.
Ever since I introduced this concept, I've been kicking myself about it the entire time.
It started as like a cartoon lawyer, and now that we've got like a fleet of them, they're like Cartoon Law and Associates. There's a lot of them
a
out
whole
there.
law firm.
It's crazy. HBO Max is actually greenlighting an origin story for the cartoon lawyers. Nobody asked for it, but you're gonna get it anyway.
Yeah, and it's gonna be 4 hours long, directed by Zack Snyder.
Yep. Stay tuned.
Nobody cares. Yay! So, what is Sym-Bionic Titan
That's
about?
Great question.
Yeah, great question. Very great question.
I'm still trying to figure it out, honestly, but
yeah, there's a bunch of stuff, and I can't wait to kind of get in and talk a little bit about this in order to kind of get a synopsis of what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to kick this over to a longtime friend and listener of the show, Bobby Anthem, for this week's synopsis. So, Bobby, take it away.
Sym-Bionic Titan is an American animated action science fiction television series created by Genndy Tartakovsky, Brian Andrews, and Paul Rudish for Cartoon Network. Sym-Bionic Titan features the adventures of 3 beings from the planet Gallaluna who crash land on Earth while attempting to escape their war-torn world. The series follows the lives of Lance, Ilana, and Octus, 2 alien teens and a robot in the form of humanoids who arrive on Earth, an identical planet to Gallaluna, while fleeing an evil general who has taken over their home planet with the help of monstrous creatures called Matrati. When called into battle, the Gallalunans are outfitted with armor that provides more than ample protection. It is when the gravest of danger appears that Octus activates the Sym-Bionic Defense Program, and he, Ilana, and Lance unite heart, body, and mind, and come together to form the spectacular cyber giant Sym-Bionic Titan.
Awesome. I think we've actually already made a decision about what Bobby is going to be in this show. He's the soul. Show.
Yeah.
He's the soul of the show.
It doesn't work without him. Like, without him, we're basically just a couple of idiots just fumbling around out here as best we can, and it's not quite as good as it could be without him, so.
6 years, hundreds of thousands of downloads, and it was just 2 stupid dum-dums flailing around, and then Bobby's like, don't worry, I got you guys on this one.
Let me just put this together into something half-functional. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, we appreciate it, Bobby. Thank you, as always. For Sym-Bionic Titan, we're going to get into the good, the bad, and the LOL. Is that a spaghetti western?
Sure.
It could be. And I would actually love to see a Clint Eastwood version of the good, the bad, and the LOL.
Release the Clint Eastwood cut.
That'd be super fun. For the good, we're going to talk about what worked for this show. The bad, we're going to talk about things that were maybe a little bit of a miss for us. For the LOL, we're going to talk about stuff that made us laugh, whether it was intentional or unintentional for the show. All of this is under the warm gravity blanket of understanding that a lot of time, energy, and especially money goes into creating all of these passion projects and things that we talk about for these cartoons. So let's get into it.
Which ones, what did we watch? Because we have 20 episodes in the first and only season of this series. So how did we narrow that down?
Oh, so we actually went on IMDb and we checked it out, and it turns out that their top rated episode was episode 18 of Family Crisis.
I think that was actually tied with 19 following that, The Steel Foe. I think they had the same score. So because of that, we couldn't really decide. And then we were like, well, there's only 1 episode left in the season, so you might as well watch that too. And then Sean went a step further and was like, well, what did you end up watching in addition?
Just episode 1. Yeah. I needed something to kind of ease into this show. The bonus is that all 20 episodes are available right now on Netflix for you to watch. So relatively accessible. I'm pretty sure you could probably find these elsewhere on the internet too. Yeah. Just thankful that we could very quickly and easily find and watch
for once.
A bunch of these.
Without me sending Sean a bunch of bot links that download a whole bunch of nasty stuff on his computer.
It's fine. I'm on my 5th computer now.
It's just guys, I don't know if you know this, but every episode we record, we throw the entire computer out afterwards.
This
Not
show
just
is
the hard
so
drive.
Wasteful.
It's so expensive to run this podcast. It's very expensive. It's 276 odd computers. As soon as this one's done, we crumble up the computer and just toss it out the window.
We also buy really, really cheap, like malleable computers.
It's smoking at this point in the middle of just recording it. So
the simple fact that these episodes even get released is amazing in and of itself.
You're not wrong. It's a minor miracle every week. So we hope you enjoy.
Absolutely. Dave, let's get into the good. What were some things that really worked for you for Sym-Bionic Titan?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned before, this is a Tartakovsky joint. So, look, and we talked about this previous to the show, but if you hadn't told me this was from Genndy Tartakovsky, and you just sat me down in front of it and made me watch an episode, I probably would have picked up pretty quickly that it was Tartakovsky. He's got a very kind of signature look to his characters. If you ever watch him draw, you can see all of his characters pretty much come from basic shapes. And he mentioned, this is probably going back 20, 25 years ago, but when he started to get into like a high volume of production of drawings, he pretty much figured out like start with the basic shapes and then slightly embellish from there. And that's pretty much what you've got with your characters. So if you go back and look at his collection of characters, you can see kind of the basic shapes that they come from. You can also kind of see that in these characters too, even though they are a little more realistic, a little more human. But you can also see things in, the choice of music. This was another Tyler Bates composition, which he and Tartakovsky have worked together for a long time. The music is very similar. The editing style is very similar. The kind of very pop culture steeped lore and mythology and everything. There's a lot of things that kind of point to this being a Tartakovsky joint. Not all of them great, not all of them for the better, but it's definitely a Tartakovsky original. And I love seeing that. I love being able to add that to my collection. What about you? Did that kind of stand out to you at all, that like this was a signature piece from a unique creative voice?
Absolutely. The things that kind of came out in and around this time, since this was released in 2010 and concluded in 2011, there were actually two shows that were non-Tartakovsky that came out, I think, before, one of which we've talked about on this show, My Life as a Teenage Robot,
right,
as a part of one of our New Year's Nicktoons, but also Clone High, just in terms of sort of the varying styles and thicknesses of lines that kind of surround some of the characters. There's a lot of this impression of like very small wrists.
Yeah,
that are carrying giant
structure,
weapons.
Yeah, or heads.
Right. But then even smaller waists in certain cases for characters. And then the complete opposite of that, which if a character is a little bit bigger, such as Octus or / Newton, he's an absolute unit of a human, like a total chonk.
It's just a square, like it's just a cube.
So, but it just the varying styles that they have for a lot of these characters are very interesting. And Tartakovsky has done a lot, like just small lines underneath eyes to kind of show fatigue or people being very like weary. So to your point, a lot of this definitely felt Tartakovsky. At the same time, I think in the 2000s, there were a lot of people that were kind of looking at maybe the success of Dexter's Lab.
Samurai Jack,
Samurai Jack, they were working with Cartoon Network Studios at a lot of these points. And so I'm positive that there was a lot of crossover or cross-pollination in terms of ideas and character design that they had, sort of in the same way that we talk about Cal Art and sort of the Cartoon Network style that they have that's out there right now. It's very interesting in kind of like researching and looking at Tartakovsky that he had started a company that was called The Orphanage.
Yeah, I think The Orphanage existed, right? And then he spun off The Orphanage Animation. So it was like The Orphanage Animation Studios, and this was the only thing that they actually produced.
Correct.
So they had other stuff.
They had another ill-fated film that was queued up, which was a Dark Crystal
The
piece
Power of the Dark Crystal.
that never got made. But this is the only, Sym-Bionic Titan is the only cartoon that they ever actually made from their animation studio, which I thought which was interesting.
It's a bummer though too, because this whole series, and we'll talk about whether it was kind of worth your watch or not, but it only had one season, and this was still, I guess this is still the case today, but they couldn't come up with a toy line or a product line for it. I don't know how, because one of the first things I looked for was the action figures for this show when I was watching it. I was just like, I would love to have like each of the individual kind of like their Titan forms, and then the overall Titan itself, plus the kaiju designs are really cool. They're what you expect. They almost look like the monsters from like the 2000 era Godzilla cartoon. But I like the designs of them. I like the designs of that cartoon. I like the designs of this one. They didn't have any action figures, so you can't find it. And then they canceled it after one season because they didn't have enough of the residual money to keep that going. But, Netflix right now, you can greenlight a second season of Sym-Bionic Titan and Dark Crystal. I would love it if you did both, please.
Anytime you want to do that, guys.
I don't know what you're doing.
Just jump in. Why not?
What's interesting, there are 10 scripts already written for a second season of Sym-Bionic Titan.
Oh, really?
Supposedly, yeah. Tartakovsky said he and his team had written an additional 10 episodes. But again, this was going on 10 plus years ago now. So it feels like one of those things that he, may revisit in the future, but it seems like he's kind of moved on.
Right. So that means if you have Netflix and you go and you stream this in mass, maybe suddenly somebody will reach out to Tartakovsky and say, hey, suddenly Sym-Bionic Titan is doing really, really well on a streaming channel. Maybe get that green light.
Look, guys, I check the top 10 TV every day because I have to for the job. I've yet to see Sym-Bionic Titan on there, but Avatar's been hanging on for a few weeks in the mid-range between 3 and 6 spots. Kipo is not on there. I was actually really disappointed in that. She-Ra was on there when the finale was running, and Avatar is on there now that they actually have the seasons up and running. But I'd love for an animation push, just like take over all of it. To be fair, right now, F is for Family and Pokemon Journeys are both on the top 10, so I guess that's a good thing too. But this is it'll change in the next week, I'm sure.
We just want to keep Bill Burr in that top 10, whatever we need to do in order to maintain top 10 for Bill Burr.
And Pikachu.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today?
I was going to say, you mentioned a little bit about design, Dave.
Yeah.
And did you have any thoughts? Because there was a lot about this cartoon that felt very accessible to me because of references to other things. But I wanted to get your impression.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the fact that you have your two main characters are kind of they're aliens. Well, three main characters, I guess. They're all aliens / robots. So Ilana is a princess. Lance is kind of a rough and tumble fighter. And then you've got Octus / Newton, who is essentially a robot, but then has a bunch of different kind of appearances that he can take on.
Right.
So the idea is that you form all three of these together into the Sym-Bionic Titan, which is the giant fighting robot that you come to know and love. But, when I say Lance, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Oh, Lance, he looks like Keith from Voltron.
He's 100, and even not just look like, but like his attitude. He's got the attitude of Keith from even the new Voltron.
Right.
But yeah, it's that old kind of tropey hero with like the long black hair and the bad attitude, and he's got a heart of gold.
So moody.
He's so moody. I love it. So it's part trope, but also they poke a little fun at it here and there. They give him things to do that play into that trope, and then some things that are kind of a little funnier on the outside of it. Tartakovsky does bring a ton of his kind of signature humor, which comes in at weird times. Just when you think it's going to be like a super dramatic moment, maybe somebody brings in a sandwich and just makes a comment about it, so it's pretty funny. Or, it can go in the other direction. He's got some wild swings. Ilana probably has the weirdest design out of everybody. She's got like a perfectly round head, and then kind of like Sean was talking about with like the pinched joints. So it was like her waist, her wrists, her ankles are all like pinched into non-existence. But definitely an interesting character design. Yet another alien princess fighting a rebellion, piloting a giant robot. I honestly think Octus might be my favorite design because it's so weird. Between Octus, Newton, the kind of dad figure with the orange turtleneck.
Right.
And they're all just like, they're built like oxes, like you said. Like they're just cubes. They're just cubes with a head on top. But then when you actually get the robot design, I thought that was pretty cool. It was interesting to see kind of a bioengineered robot that was sort of, how would you describe it?
It kind of felt like a disembodied ghost.
Yeah, or I was going to say like a jellyfish in like a walking aquarium kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's just kind of, it's weird looking.
Yeah, a ghost of a jellyfish.
A jellyfish ghost. We got it.
Jelly ghost.
I feel like that's in a Mario game, but yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. But it was interesting.
Yeah, I felt like Octus was one of the more really original characters that was in this show, and each persona that he projects was also very, very fun.
Yeah. Who'd you like more? Did you like the dad or kind of the brother version more?
Oh, I loved the Newton character. I thought the Newton character just made me laugh a lot.
Yeah.
Especially, I enjoy Brian Posehn.
Sure.
been a fan of Brian Posehn's comedy for a long time. When you and I were actually living in Pittsburgh, I went to go see the Comedians of Comedy tour with Patton Oswalt, Brian Posehn, Maria Bamford. So, and I've read some of Brian's comics that he's put out there. So to be able to kind of see him in this, perfect casting on their part, perfect delivery in terms of how Brian Posehn sounds and what he's able to do.
We'll talk about that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It was
Actually,
great.
do you want to talk about that since you're talking about kind of the voice acting and how they match the characters, or do you want to wait?
Well, sure. I also wanted to say just about sort of the accessibility. You mentioned Ilana. She really looks like Ashi. At least the haircut is identical to what was in Samurai Jack.
Yeah, and even the proportions and design are kind of the same. And that's what I said. Like, you can look at that character and you can spot the like 2 or 3 shapes that build that character out. And it's just like a circle and then like kind of a drawn out, like maybe a teardrop or a diamond kind of shape. And that's about it.
We have a character named Solomon who is a part of this group called the Galactic Guardian Group, which I keep wanting to say Guardians of the Galaxy Group.
Just call it G3 because that's what they call it in the show.
I know, but I also kind of want to call it G2, the Gatorade product they have.
Or you can call it sponsored by Gatorade.
Yeah, my brain has pivoted multiple times off of just the G3 name. So Solomon is in charge of this group called G3.
Yeah.
And he 100% is Alucard in design from the Hellsing anime. So if you're familiar with Hellsing, welcome. Alucard is in this, just not a vampire. Not a vampire.
As far as we know. He could be.
As far as we know.
Who
Could
knows?
be. Second season probably opens that up.
It's so weird because sometimes you see him and he's got, the kind of beady-eyed glasses with the red lenses and he's pretty intense. Otherwise, he's like dressed all in black. But then there's like one moment in one of the later episodes where they have some random like shirtless scenes of the dudes in this series, and they're just like jacked. They're just like super ripped, and I'm just like, you don't look like that when you have like your uniform and stuff on. Now all of a sudden you're like 3 times as big and like super ripped. But they actually made Solomon look like he's looking pretty good there in the end, and then he puts all his gear back on. So it's just kind of like, what is this show? And I'll talk about that more. I don't know if it's going to be in my bad or my LOLs, but there's some ratings.
Sexy aspect.
There's some ratings pushing stuff in this show too, especially because it aired on Cartoon Network like 2010, 2011. So we'll talk about that.
Right. So to go with this, we have Ilana. She is Tara Strong.
Yep.
Tara Strong has been in hundreds of things.
Everything.
Harlequin, Bubbles in Powerpuff Girls.
Yep.
Long time, voice actress. She's done so many things that are in Cartoon Network that have kind of probably defined a majority of our childhood.
Oh,
She's
sure.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I think she does a great job of kind of distinguishing and breaking this character out beyond just what we classically know her as for some of these characters from our childhood. So interesting to see and great to see something that is not familiar from Tara Strong.
Yeah,
so that was fun. We have Kevin Toms, who is the voice of Lance.
And he's kind of a newcomer relative to everybody else in the show.
Exactly. So I thought that he did a great job with sort of some of the moodiness that's in here as well. And we'll talk about this because I think the voice acting is great. I have some notes about the voice directing that we could talk about a little bit later on. But we have General Julius Steele is John DiMaggio.
He's so good at
it's
this
so
one.
good.
I love
so
this
good.
role for him. And he loves the role for himself, you can tell.
I loved every minute of having General Steele. If there was a General Steele spinoff, I would watch that.
Absolutely. And like,
I would kickstart and fundraise it.
And this is what I think of when I think of John DiMaggio. Like, he's got some range. He can play quite a few different types of characters. But when I think of a John DiMaggio voice, like, this is the character I want him playing. This, the Scotsman from Samurai Jack, like, those are the guys I want him playing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Let me ask you a quick question. Did you have any color theory?
You beat me to it.
Okay, cool.
Yep. The interesting thing that we've talked about regarding color theory is that for a lot of times you will have enemies in shows be kind of like a purple or a blue color, like a darker blue color. So looking at that Roy G. Biv spectrum, it'll be sort of on the right-hand side in the Biv section.
The old Biv section.
Old Biv. So looking at sort of some of those colors that you have on that side, classically you will have good guys that sit in the Roy and the G, and then the Biv is the bad guys. That's been standard color theory for a lot of cartoons. This one's a little bit more interesting because for Lance in his robot armor that we'll talk about a little bit later, because it did make me laugh. It really looks like the dwarven armor from Skyrim.
Yep.
Even like the comb that is on the helm, just like that large kind of like piece that the plume, and you know, he's a soldier, you know, from Galaluna. So it makes sense that he would have that kind of particular look.
And his loadout makes sense too. He's got like crazy like flying rockets and like huge Gatling guns, and he's much bigger than Ilana's version. Yeah.
So he's got all these things that are kind of included as a part of this robot that he can turn into, but it is purple. Yeah. It is a purple robot. Mm-hmm. And then the things that make it even a little bit more interesting is that when they combine all three of them together to create Titan, there's still a little bit of a purple tint that is in there. Yeah. But because of the ghost jellyfish and the gold,
yeah,
the
Ilana's
rod
gold.
From Ilana.
She's full on gold, and she's more slight, and she's speedy, and she's got kind of like a shield that she uses very often. But yeah, she has an interesting color. I like that contrast between them, though, the gold and the purple together as a team. Yeah.
But with the actual overlay then of Octus on top of them, it almost kind of has a little bit of a bluish hue. So it's kind of moving like from like the violet or indigo into kind of like a blue, something that might be a little bit safer. And it's even funny that like when you see the title card that says Sym-Bionic Titan, it's more of a blue color and outline where they show sort of the profile of Titan himself. So it's a blue and a gold, which is interesting because there is sort of still a purple that's in there. So if you've been a long-time listener, this breaks my color theory in half.
Well,
Break it
but
over
I think
your knee.
that's interesting because I would imagine that color theory has to be a big part of the creation, storyboarding, character design process because you want to say a lot with as little as possible, right? So look at Voltron, look at Power Rangers. You've got those distinct colors of each of those individual robots. You match the pilots to them. That makes it very easy for kids to just be like, oh, I like, you know, the black Power Ranger and the black, what was it, oh my God, I just blanked on what the actual Mastodon. You know, like those two things are the same color, so I like them together or whatever. The same goes for Voltron until they start to mix it up later on and confuse kids everywhere. Yeah.
But it's hard because whenever they do the bib section for people that they consider to be an enemy, they will typically do that in terms of like skin tone.
And that's the thing. Look at Voltron. Yeah. All the, you know, Zarkon and his ilk are all very purple skinned.
Purple skin.
And then we talked about it, a couple of weeks ago? I forget what was it?
Oh, Ulysses 31.
Ulysses 31. Ulysses. Had purple dude who's just like purple robed mad scientist magician guy who was just like,
and the moment you see him, you're just like, you're
that's
evil.
A bad guy. Yeah, exactly.
You're a new character.
So
and you're in purple.
I did like that they changed this up a lot, and especially even like G3. G3 is an organization that's kind of extra military. They act outside of normal military as kind of an anti-alien protection force, and most of their color scheme is black and red. So it's very severe, very kind of strict. Did you say impressive?
Oh, I said
it's impressive and aggressive.
No, it's aggressive.
It's aggressive and
it's
impressive.
Very violent. It's very violent looking.
There's a clash there, but it also looks cool. And by the end of this first season, I guess, everybody works together. So it's the Sym-Bionic Titan, the military, and their typical kind of like khakis and greens, and then even G3 kind of working together too. So it was interesting to see all those colors kind of come together and see how they played out. I like that. Yeah. Coupled with the animation, which was a great kind of like balance of traditional hand-drawn characters and then a lot of CG that actually works really well when it comes to the moving parts of the robots and the jellyfish ghosts and all that.
Yeah. Tell me about the CG, because, you know, we've talked about CG in cartoons before, you know, even as far back as like Reboot.
Yeah.
When they really did a great job. Again, you know, like weird to think about Reboot because it was purple skin for some of those characters as well.
Yeah.
Like even Bob,
the
you know,
sprites.
even thinking about robots such as Megaduce from the Big O.
Yeah. Is
kind of like a purple and like a dark blue with like red kind of flare on him as well.
Yeah, I don't know. That kind of he's more like a gunmetal. I kind of put him, Sym-Bionic Titan, and Iron Giant all kind of in the same kind of category for me.
Gotcha.
But as far as like the CG in this one, I like that they had, even in like the title sequence and some intro sequences, you get to see that traditional hand-drawn animation kind of superimposed or overlaid on a CG background. And I think they went with the CG for things that were effects heavy, right? So if you have, say, a lightning energy monster that's just a bunch of like crackling, looks like one of those like Tesla coils or whatever you put your hands on and the arcs of electricity, static electricity come out. That's hard to do in traditional hand-drawn animation. It's a little easier to do with computer-generated stuff. So you can have those kind of like lightning effects, or you can have that transparency that actually looks like it has a depth of field rather than just like a clear window. So things like animating Octus when he's in robot form, things like the Sym-Bionic Titan itself and battling against the kaiju, it also gives you a different kind of look. There's not just the scale of it, but there's also a different kind of look when they're moving across like a hand-painted background. They have more of a gravity to it. They have more of an otherworldly kind of feel, especially when even like General Steel's giant mech, the Hammer, goes like storming across through the city. Like, they look different because they're animated differently, but it doesn't look bad. It actually looks good and adds to the story and the experience.
Right. Especially for the year when this was released.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about, I hate to get into it, but we've talked about Canadian cartoons before and their use sometimes.
They know.
Yeah, Canada knows.
You know Canada.
Yeah. And so just looking at some of the CG that we've seen from previous shows that we've had a chance to discuss, man, sometimes really bad. This, very strategic in terms of how they were using it, and it really worked so well.
It wasn't overdone.
What they were attempting to accomplish.
Yeah.
Right. So
let me ask you this. How did you feel about, we only got to see a few episodes, and it was kind of a brief introduction to the series itself. How did you feel about the story and how they kind of handled the story, either episode specific or among these various characters?
I really liked the storytelling in this. You know, for the 4 episodes that I've had a chance to watch, you know, there definitely seemed to be some good emotional punch in terms of them being able to provide some backstory and some history for some of these characters and what even say Octus / Newton meant to Lance and Ilana. And it's great to see that impact kind of threaded into an episode, you know, such as episode 18.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much that's there that's very fun. Even at the end of episode 18, there is a moment where I don't think we're going to spoil anything.
It's 10 years old at this point. Go watch it, guys.
Where Octus gets attacked by this electricity monster that Dave has been talking about, this Tesla coil kind of cracking in space, touches him and it drains his battery and they can't restart him suddenly. And so they, rightfully so, they've built enough tension and emotion in that episode where when it hits, you're like, oh, like, you know it's going to happen. It's predictable in terms of where the story is going.
Yeah, he loses like a foot earlier, so you're that's the foreshadowing. So you're just waiting for it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it happens, and it doesn't lessen the impact of that moment. And then you begin to see something that is very fun, which is Tartakovsky beginning to do storytelling through just simply visuals and score.
Yeah.
And if you're familiar with a show that we've talked about on recently that's been a Tartakovsky for Adult Swim, being Primal, being able to see those elements of where we know, even going back to Dexter's lab, that he's been able to do this visual scored storytelling, to see that translate into this show. Again, it resonates with what you said earlier, Dave. There are moments when you're watching things where you have to just say, that is distinctly Tartakovsky. And I love it. I love watching it. So to see it suddenly transition from voice acting and everything that's in there to just being able to tell the emotional gravity of a story, and suddenly Lance dealing with what's taking place, it's brutal. Like it's very cool to watch.
And that's where you can tell Tartakovsky really shines. He's gotten better over the years as far as the writing goes, but he really shined as a visual storyteller first, which is why most of his productions, if he was in charge of them, they didn't really script anything. They kind of storyboarded it out first and then hit the emotional beats, the timing, got all that down. And then they kind of just folded in the dialogue after the fact. So in other words, it wasn't the dialogue, the narrative that was telling the story. It was the visuals, which is very clear here. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else for you, Dave, just in terms of good points?
I will say, and I know this is a point of contention with you, but I actually didn't love the theme song. I couldn't repeat it to you right now. I just like that it was short and sweet. It moved kind of into that era of it, like Adventure Time, where...
What?
I'm not comparing it as far as quality.
you're out of your mind.
I'm simply saying we moved into the era where it's like a 10 or 15 second theme blip, and that's all you get. So it's no longer like an actual theme song. It's just kind of like a fanfare.
Dave, Adventure Time has a ukulele intro theme song that goes on for like more than like a flash in the pan. This theme song, if we're gonna transition, I want to get into this. There was no theme song in this.
It's not.
This was an afterthought. This was.
It's a fanfare.
They didn't even try. They didn't even try. You should have just put a title screen up and just a little bit of music, and then transition into the episode. This didn't exist. And what makes this so frustrating? I'm sorry. This doesn't
exist.
This really, really upset me because I had recently gone back and watched the Dexter's Lab intro, and you look at Dexter's Lab. He is capable of making an incredible intro for a cartoon. He's done it time and time again. And this,
even Samurai Jack,
exactly. Samurai Jack, wonderful storytelling. Dexter does a great job of that visual storytelling with the score. The Samurai Jack does both, but it also has some context in terms of bringing you into the story that's there. All of them incredible. This. Wow, the worst.
Sean's passion for this case. Yeah, it's not. There's nothing there.
There's nothing there. It's crap. It really is crap. It's like, here's the characters, great title screen.
Moving on.
Yeah, I felt bad because before, reaching for the remote to just hit the skip intro button was so dumb. It was going to be over in 5 seconds.
By the time you hit the button, it would have been done. Yeah.
Yeah. Reach for the remote. It's already over. It's already over. That kind of felt like a missed opportunity. I was a little bit bummed out about that.
Now, wait, you watched the first episode, though, too. So did they have, an extended version of it or anything like that there? That's it? That's all you get?
What you see is what you get.
And
they really WYSIWYG this up.
We really, we talk about clip shows. We talk about dedicated animation. We talk about character roll call. This is just like a fanfare. And it's just like, burr, burr, burr. And that's all you get.
This was dedicated animation, but dedicated to being crap.
Yeah, fair. That's fair.
Yeah, it was a bummer. It was a real bummer.
I will say, though, that sometimes I do like when you just here's the show and then just get to it. I'm not saying it was good. I'm just saying I appreciate, okay, I don't have to sit through a theme song.
But we've watched cartoons that do a great job of that, even recently.
Yeah.
Where they have a great theme song and they build in and they work on it. Kipo has an unbelievably short theme song.
Yep.
That kind of goes from wherever the Kipo word, the name Kipo is in the actual background of a scene, to that very, very short music number that's in there. And it just kind of gives you the title card and the Age of the Wonder Beasts.
Yep.
And it's simple. The music is wonderful.
Yeah, this was an afterthought, if that.
Yeah. It's super enjoyable. But even sometimes there have been cartoons that you and I have watched where they get closer to the end of a season and they just say, we're not going to give you the theme song. We're just going to let you jump right into the action because we know we left you at a cliffhanger and we want to bring you in.
Sure.
What a great artistic decision. This
not here.
Oof. Nice.
So I guess we're in the bad section.
Yeah.
Now I want to bring up a point you made earlier. The voice acting, I think, is okay. It's hard to separate it from the voice direction because when you're being told to do one thing that may be the wrong thing, it's like, well, you're doing the wrong thing, but you're doing it really well. It's really hard to make that distinction between bad. I do think I agree with you though that that lies on Tartakovsky. I don't know why he decided. I feel like his direction in the booth would have been make it more robotic or more alien. And I don't know how you really do that. Robotic, fine, but that's never not a criticism from people. Their voice sounds too robotic. That's not a good thing. And in just these few episodes, that it really bothered me how kind of stilted a lot of this stuff was. It wasn't very natural. It wasn't conversational. Even 20 episodes in, these characters, even when they were just talking to themselves, not talking to other humans, not talking to it an awkward situation, just talking to each other, it still felt robotic and alien.
I mean, for a show that focuses on robot aliens, Dave.
But it's it's one of those things where
I know what you're saying.
I have the same issue with Three Below. Sometimes in the earlier episodes, it's too, they're acting too much like they want to be something different. You might as well be a robot or an alien or a robot alien from the 50s or 60s, where it was they were so different to just drive home that point that we are not from here. We're from a different planet. So we talk like this. It's it just feels artificial. And you don't need it because these characters they carry enough weight themselves. And if you've been paying attention to any of the plot, you don't you don't need to be constantly being reinforced that like they're not from here. They're aliens or they're robots. You can figure that out when they morph into giant fighting robots or turn into a ghost jellyfish. Like, oh, that's not human normally. Yeah, like I get it. Now, that being said, voice direction for John DiMaggio, which was hopefully just like, go ahead, John, just do your thing.
John, whatever you want to do.
Whatever you want to do,
go
John.
do it.
We'll just
John, you're knocking it out of the park.
Right, exactly.
Let it happen, buddy.
And these, Posehn and Strong and Tom's, I think his last name was, they knew what they were doing, at least for Strong and Posehn. They know what they're doing. So that, I think, comes down to direction.
Right.
It just wasn't super strong. Did you have an issue with any of the editing?
Did I?
Okay, good.
Yeah. For me, there were moments where the camera would linger on a moment that had passed for like an extra beat. And it didn't make any sense to me. So, if your episode 18 took place on a weird kind of space station satellite.
Some of it, yeah.
And there were moments where they would run through a corridor and then all the characters would run off screen. And then it would hover on the empty corridor where they just ran through for like just an extra beat or two. Enough where visually you can see it and you're like, why aren't we following the action in terms of what's happening? This doesn't make sense to me visually, given how strong Tartakovsky is as a visual storyteller. There were just these like very weird extended lags that happened a couple times.
I think it took him out of his element, like literally when you're doing space station stuff. But, if you go back to Samurai Jack, lingering on those scenes were always about staying in that moment for a little bit longer. He did it a lot more in his Samurai Jack kind of finale recently. But
I felt like when he did it in Samurai Jack, it was in like there was a reason that you were focusing or looking on something, not an empty corridor.
That's the thing. Like Samurai Jack was probably like, it was like a quiet, still pond, or even like Primal. You were like watching, if there was like a massacre or whatever, and then the camera lingers over just like the chaos and then the result of it, even if it's quiet now. That's to keep you in that moment. There's no reason to linger and just sit in this empty corridor when literally the action is happening down there. I think it's just a timing issue for him in this specific series. I think they had issues with editing. They had issues with transitions, definitely. There's something to be said about making a strong, sudden transition into things. But when you're literally jumping back and forth, not just through space, but through time, it's a little jarring and a little confusing at times to be like, where are we? Who are we talking with? When are we? Why are we talking to these people now? Why are you showing me a scene where you were sick out of context like 3 years ago or whatever? Like, I get that he was trying to build up kind of a memory bank for these characters and have a peek into their pasts and their relationships together, especially knowing now, like foreshadowing that there was a loss that was coming. So we're hemming around a little bit, but Lance and Ilana, you see some memory flashbacks with them spending time with Newton. Even if they're just like very basic interactions, a conversation in a hallway, it was something I'll talk about in an LOL. Just to remind you that they have like this emotional history so that when Newton is lost, presumably killed, it hits a little harder. It was kind of really just shoehorned in there in a way I didn't think it was great.
Speaking of Newton and Octus, any thoughts or comments that you have in the bad section about this, Dave?
Did you watch the sexy Kimmy scene?
Yeah.
It was something else. I mean, out of context, it's like, what is this? Even in context, it's not much better. I don't know that I've ever seen... What? Are these supposed to be high school kids?
Yes.
It felt like a scene pulled out of like a slasher movie where like the kids go to the cabin and they all pair off. And the one sexy girl tries to like, flirt with and like, rile up the nerdy guy or whatever. That's exactly what this was. Now, I like
get them all horned up.
All horned up. I like Newton's delivery in this because he just was just like, just deadpan. But it was really weird to see them animate this like teenage high school cheerleader sexy girl doing like, this was during like the twerking age, I guess. Because she definitely twerks. She somehow does like a stripper routine on a lamp. There are a lot of weird stuff. Now, granted, Sean and I went out of our comfort zone to watch this because it wasn't in any of the episodes we're talking about. But literally, if you look up Sym-Bionic Titan and the characters, especially Newton or Octus, you'll come across this. because it was such one of the weirdest moments that everybody wanted to talk about for whatever reason. So
it's very curious.
Awkward.
Even in the first episode, whenever they crash land, they get confronted by Solomon and the army, like almost immediately. They manage to escape, and in the escape, like the quick aftermath is Newton saying, "I've enrolled everybody in school. We're going to be hiding out in a high school." And then on the high school campus, he's explaining like who the jocks are, who the nerds are. And then he very clearly delineates and says, these are the cheerleaders. They are easily the most powerful group that is here, and kind of moves in that direction. And you're just like, huh,
that's weird.
I wonder if that's going to come. Oh, it's coming back.
And then we even see in the finale, which I still don't understand, spoiler alert, Octus/Newton comes back in ways that I still don't really understand how that happened.
No, nobody really does.
Nobody does. That's the cliffhanger.
Yeah. But continue.
But it's like Newton supposedly contacts Kimmy, who's been waiting for him. So there's some kind of future for these two, though I don't really know how it's going to work out when she finds out more.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. 10 years later.
Yeah. That actually was something for me that was a little bit of that aired on the kind of the side of the bad. There is a mysterious character who shows up at the end in episode 20. And it's kind of curious because he's noted as being the G3 superior,
right?
Who kind of even gives Solomon, like, you think Solomon's at the top of the food chain. No, there's this G3 superior
this
character,
trench coat wearing
there.
Dude. Yeah.
You really don't. You never see a face. You see hands typing on keyboards, and you see him bringing up, like, you see, presumably it's a he, bringing up sort of some of the memories that they have from Octus to be able to show some of these, like, these horned up memories. We've clearly gotten after dark. And so,
and that was, to our credit, that was where the first memory of Kimmy doing her twerking pole dancing pops up. Right. It was when he's being like rebooted and like, I remember that. It's like, I bet you do, bud. Hard to forget that.
So there's a lot of stuff that goes there. We would not have gotten enough information watching these 3 episodes and the extra one that I watched. We would not have gotten enough to kind of understand who this character potentially would have been. But there evidently is some fan theory around this, Dave. You want to know a little fan theory?
I would love to hear fan theory.
Okay, so the G3 Superior is a character that is called Edward.
Okay.
And he is from Galaluna, and he is Lance's dad.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. And the whole thought or the idea is that in the first episode, the way that the kaiju get to Earth is through this technology called a rift gate.
Sounds familiar.
Right. Very familiar. Again, I really think Guillermo del Toro just like snatched up this cartoon and turned this into a movie.
I want to talk about that before we move on to the LOLs. Yeah. Tell me more about Edward.
So they, at some point when Lance's dad, Edward, was testing this rift gate technology, because he was obviously the lead scientist, he went through and he disappeared in some of the initial testing, and they never heard from him again.
Oh, okay.
The thought and the idea is that he has been helping Solomon on Earth create this force that could combat anybody coming through the rift gates in the future.
How else would they have prepared for the aliens to know that they're even out there? Okay, that makes sense.
Exactly.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense.
Why is Edward all squat and octus shaped?
Yeah, you don't really find out what this looks like. He looks like one of the characters from Last Man. The guy who owns the boxing with the mustache.
Yeah.
Like in any of the flashbacks that it kind of shows, like it looks like that particular character. But you have no idea why he's got like a mechanical hand or he's real squat. So I'm sure that would be
Ask Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah, exactly.
I really want to know the backstory here. So I want to know if these two guys hang out and Genndy just kind of does like, he's like, oh, I'm working on this animated things and here's my idea. And Guillermo's just kind of like, that's cool. And then he wants to make like the live action version of it. And that's what happens because he's kind of done it twice now. Maybe he just really is a fan of Sym-Bionic Titan and he wants to he's just inspired by it. I don't know. Pacific Rim takes stuff almost verbatim from this show. And then Three Below takes the central idea, minus the Titan stuff, and does it again. So it's really interesting, like even right down to the alien siblings fleeing to Earth with kind of an older protective force with them. Three Below is a lot like that, and a lot like Sym-Bionic Titan. I would love to have those two sit down and just be like, when you get together for coffee or drinks or whatever you do, like, do you just share ideas and then each of you kind of run with that general idea in your own specific region, or what's the deal here? Because there's a lot of crossover.
And hopefully it's a friendly conversation.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's not like them sitting down like, I brought my lawyer and we'd like to talk about intellectual property.
Having spoken to both of them, I can't imagine there's any kind of animosity or even competition. Right. I feel like it's just kind of like good, positive, creative energy. They have to bond over the same kinds of things. I guarantee those two have the same, like you and I. If they were to sit down and do an animation podcast, they would geek out over the same kind of stuff that we do. It would just be maybe shifted generationally 10 years or so, but it would be the same kind of thing. It's just that rather than doing a weekly podcast, they're actually making, multi-million-dollar productions. So it's,
same thing.
Pretty much the same thing is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But no, I'd love to have them, sit down with them, talk to them together, and just see where that comes from. But yeah.
Anything else on the bad side?
I don't think so. It was a pretty solid show. There wasn't anything that really made me kind of like take notice, like, oof, that was really rough. It was pretty solid throughout. I will say this isn't a bad thing, but because we're transitioning into LOLs, a little more drama heavy in these last few episodes. There's definitely laughs to be found, but because of the stakes and because they were ending the season/series and because they killed off more or less a main character, like it was a little more dramatic than it was comedy. Yeah. But there are definitely Tartakovsky funny moments in there, which I'm sure you have a lot of.
Let's get into some of these funny moments. A lot of these moments involved very specific characters that they had that were in there. And I don't know why I laughed, but there's a news reporter who just happens to be on the scene for no other reason than just his name alone. Every time he would say something, be like, "I'm Brick Jackson." And for some reason, Brick Jackson, chef's kiss of a name. I love it.
It's good stuff.
I love it.
I will say, go ahead, Brick Jackson.
Oh, he came on like 2 or 3 times in those last couple episodes, and I laughed every time. I was like, this is so silly.
And I just love, too, that he was on the side of the Titans. Like, he was like super excited to see the Titans return, and he wasn't a big fan of like General Steel and kind of like told him to go off camera or whatever. But like, Brick Jackson was good. I will say, when I first plopped down to watch this, the very first thing I watch in episode 18, you're on a space station, the klaxons are kind of wailing, there's a soldier who's like knocked down. I know, LOL, right? And then Solomon comes in, and he's got the crazy glasses with the red kind of beady eyes. And I was just like, is this a Venture Brothers cartoon? It looked like it could have been straight lifted. Like if they would have rolled to that like Venture Brothers fanfare and title shot, I wouldn't have been surprised. I would have thought I clicked on the wrong link. But the LOL comes from that. It's just the soldier that's laying on the ground. As Solomon asks him, like, what happened? The soldier just screams, "Energy!" and just like points behind him, and then he immediately dies. Like, those are your last words, sir. Those were your last words. Energy!
Energy!
And that's what made me think, like, I might be watching a Venture Brothers cartoon.
No, I could see that.
Yeah.
Without any context, I could 100% see that.
Yep.
We've talked a little bit about General Steel.
Yeah.
I want to equate him to another show that I love, Ren and Stimpy.
Sure.
It looks like Anthony's dad / the Lummox / George Liquor.
Yeah.
All kind of rolled into one character from Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah.
He is that sort of like classic old machismo, toxic, garbage attitude, just like all sandwiched into a lazy boy recliner.
A little bit of American pride pumped in there.
Yeah. It just, some of it was good, some of it was bad, but there were just these like certain moments where he would say a phrase like "Jumpin' Jehoshaphat," which just made me laugh because who actually says that?
And it's John DiMaggio, keep in mind,
John
too.
DiMaggio.
So,
just every time there's the moment where he's in his lazy boy and he's flipping through the channels and they're like, "Hammer, hammer, hammer." And if we haven't explained hammer, it's the large robot that
What's
they
it stand
have.
For?
Right. It's oh my gosh, it's Homeland Mobile Emergency Robot.
Yep. Which they actually did not even build themselves. They'd co-opted an alien rocket ship that had landed and brought another species here, and then they took that and turned it into their own machine. So
right, yeah. So he's flipping through the channel, and they're giving him praise on television, and then his phone rings, presumably to maybe give him more praise.
Yeah.
And he just goes, "Can I have a minute?"
He's been watching the Hammer commercials slide through for the last 30 seconds at this point,
and just yelling,
screaming,
like, "Hammer, hammer,
the hammer,
hammer, hammer!" Like over and over and over again. That character just made me laugh.
And there were silly things throughout. So in one of the early in episode 18, it's Octus's / Newton's birthday, so he gets a birthday present. Silly scenes, and this is when I talk about Tartakovsky being a visual storyteller. Just like this little box that Ilana gives him, he opens it up, and then he spends probably a few seconds too long just ripping out the packaging that's in it. Just so tissue
weird.
paper, just so much tissue paper for 5 seconds. That's a lot of tissue paper. Just little things like that are funny because they're just off enough they're just funny. They just kind of make you laugh. I love little things like that. Similar to Octus, again, he was taking care of Ilana at one point because she was sick. Things that you don't expect to happen, like his chest cavity open up and there'd just be a roaring fireplace with him there. And she's like, I can feel the warmth. I'm sure it was just a digital projection or whatever, but it was just very silly moments like that. I loved them.
I honestly thought for a couple seconds, I was like, oh, somebody lit that poor robot on fire in his chest.
They lit that ghost jellyfish up.
You and I both agree that there's a moment where there's a proposal that's about to happen that
Such
we
a
both
good
found
scene.
very funny.
Set that up for us, because we've got kaiju who are now, this is at the very end,
Right.
kaiju who are now crashing to Earth in 3 separate areas while our heroes are all fighting each other in the meantime.
So we suddenly cut to, as we were seeing this one big lump come through a rift gate with a kaiju, and then it splits apart into 3, and then they crash land at 3 different areas. One, you don't really know what it is. One's San Francisco. One looks like it's presumably France.
Yeah, Paris, yeah.
Paris. And so the one in Paris, you see a guy on what looks like an Eiffel Tower, and he's sweating.
Oh, he's nervous.
He's sweating.
He's with a lovely lady.
Yeah. He begins to reach in and get down on a knee and open up the engagement ring box, and then suddenly that comment just whoosh, it seems
I thought it was going to kill him. I was concerned it was going to smash right into him. Yeah, I was that's rough
because they decimate almost everything.
All San Francisco gets destroyed, Guillermo del Toro. Right. So yeah.
And so they just have this comet with this kaiju come down and smash, and it frightens the poor woman, who just screams out "no" in response to the kaiju comet,
right.
Not to the guy with the ring.
Bad case of timing.
Yeah, but it's a very fun visual gag to see him kind of close up the ring box.
And he's just oh. It's so funny because she obviously is paying attention to the impending doom and disaster, and he's hyper focused on her response to this. So then just the fact that he doesn't even clock that this kaiju just roared by them, and he's just oh. It was sad and hilarious at the same time. Little touches like that in the middle of this climactic series ending dramatic story are just absolutely hysterical, and it's something that Tartakovsky and his team do really well. I will say, too, you were talking about General Steel earlier and the giant hammer robot. Because this thing is so big and clunky and just has so many, just big, chunky parts to it. When it's first set up and battling a kaiju before these other ones show up, he just screams, "Evasive action!" And it doesn't move. It just sits there, and then you see on its left side, a half dozen just huge rockets fire and just slowly slide it to the side so it can dodge an incoming attack or whatever.
I love
it's so
that
chunky.
Strafe was its power, was its secret energy.
And you
just
had to
dodge
burn
to the side.
100 million gallons of fuel just to slowly slide it to the side, and that's how it dodged.
Or just even the fact that Hammer's finishing move, or one of its finishing moves, is the Skull Crusher.
Yeah,
which
from wrestling.
Which must have been thousands of gallons of fuel to get it above the kaiju, and then just cut, extend a leg, cut the engine, and then just drop.
Watching that thing move is really fun. I would not be surprised if Del Toro and Tartakovsky talked about giant robot like mechanics and physics and adding weight to these things, so they're not just all flying around like a Megas XLR or anything like that. Like actually add some like heft, some chunk to these things.
Oh, these things are
fun.
Heck of chonks,
especially
in terms
Hammer.
of what they look like. Yeah,
like Titan when spoiler alert, Octus is finally able to rejoin the team and they can reform Titan. Watching that thing kind of like newly powered up and ripping through these kaiju, that was a lot of fun. That was one of the best sequences I think in the whole series. But yeah, it was good times. Anything else made you laugh?
I'm at a weird age where watching all of this stuff with General Steel doing all these things, General Steel makes mention the fact that Hammer is American made thanks to taxpayer money.
Yeah.
And I'm at an age where suddenly he said that and I was like, how much money are we spending on this?
That was a lot of waste.
Oof.
That was a lot, bud.
I mean,
that evasive action cost about $6 billion.
I was like, yeah, exactly. I was like, R&D on a huge robot, destruction of all these cities. I mean, think about all the different agencies that are getting involved. This
vote
is crazy,
local,
gang.
kids. Vote local.
Yeah, vote local.
Kids, I say, to the kids who can vote.
Everybody.
I will say, Lance, surprisingly, made me laugh more often than anybody else, just because of the situations that they put him in. So at one point, he's trying to reboot Octus, and he tries to plug into like the motel that they're staying in. He tries to plug into their electrical grid, and he ends up shorting out the entire like block or grid itself. That was kind of funny. He has another moment when he's in his robot form, and he's just like carving up all these military jets, just like flying around, just like slicing them in half. At one point, he kind of like lands on one, and then like gestures to the pilot like, "You should just hit the button, bud." Yeah, and the pilot just looks at him, gives him a thumbs up, and then just ejects so he doesn't get slaughtered. He's just like, "Thanks for the heads up, bud." Really cute moments like that.
There's even in the first episode when they get to school, and there's always that awkward introduction in homeroom where the teacher says, "We have Lance. He's a new student. Lance, would you like to tell the class something about yourself?"
Yeah.
And just as like a moody teen emo kid, he sits there and just goes, "No." And every girl in the classroom suddenly like springs up and is like,
it.
"Oh, hey." Anything else from the LOL?
I think that was pretty much it. Like I said, there's a few character moments here and there, but mostly they were more dramatic towards the end. So I would imagine there's a lot more funny stuff throughout the series itself, but hey, a good reason to go back and watch. What about you?
Absolutely. No, I don't think there's any other LOLs. So let's get into our recommendations.
Cool.
As a recap, we can recommend a cartoon and we can say why we think it's a good use of your time. We can also, conversely, not recommend a cartoon and say exactly why we don't think it's worth your time and possibly make a recommendation on something else that would be better. If we don't recommend something, we can go one step further and we can give it the dip. Yes, the dip from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It erases it from the annals of cartoon history. In the 276 episodes, I believe we've had 4 or 5 dips.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, ish. So a couple cartoons have actually been dipped. We can't talk about them anymore. You know why? Cartoon lawyers.
And they don't exist.
They don't exist. We've set up these rules, and now we are living by them. So for Jesse's recommendation of Sym-Bionic Titan, Dave, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I mean, in few words, it's a Tartakovsky joint. It's aliens, it's robots, it's giant fighting robots. And it's a pretty solid character story at the same time. So it's a shame we didn't get to see more of this. But, like Sean mentioned, there are 20 episodes out there. They tell a really good story. They're available on Netflix now. So yeah, I'd say I recommend it. How about you?
I'm in the same boat. Jesse, great recommendation.
Good job,
This
bud.
is a recommend for me as well. I really enjoyed this. It was very fun. There's a lot of things that felt very accessible, as I've mentioned. I hate to kind of go through a laundry list of things to reference, but
There's a lot.
there's a lot.
Everything from Tartakovsky, everything from Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah, right. Everything from other weird anime that I've watched.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of good things that are here that are interesting. I like to see the idea that we talked about at the very beginning of the show, which is kind of I don't know, maybe it's sort of the posit or the idea that they have in this cartoon about sort of making sure that for the Galilunans that you can actually kind of merge these 3 different facets of a person. So heart, body, and mind, which really comes into play nicely for our three main characters that we have, and sort of their combined goal, despite these interesting opposition forces of the U.S. military, as well as also G3, who sort of becomes a friendly to them over time.
Yeah.
So I think for the character dynamic and the dynamics of the different groups that they have, plus, as Dave said, giant fighting monsters, kaiju, giant fighting robots, all of this was a lot of fun. All of these are available, all 20 episodes for season 1 on Netflix. I had a blast watching this. This might become my cartoon that I watch for like the next week or two while I'm having breakfast in the morning. So I had a great time with this. So thank you, Jesse. Really appreciated this. So great recommendation. That's it. We got all the way through it. We got all the way through.
We did it.
Sym-Bionic Titan.
We did it.
Well, Jesse, thank you for your recommendation. Another thank you that we have to give out is somebody else that you heard on this show, our buddy Bobby Anthem.
Yeah, the soul.
Yep, you heard him on this episode. You can also hear him on his paranormal podcast, Inhuman Experience, with his co-host Bobby Blades. You can find them on Twitter at IEXP_podcast if you want to chat with them. And Bobby also has a solo show called In Search of My Lost Soul. It's in the same stream as Inhuman. So find Inhuman and listen to In Search of My Lost Soul. I think there's about 9 episodes that are out right now. It's fantastic. You can find Inhuman Experience anywhere that you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, anywhere else. Check it out. Dave, what do you got going on, buddy?
Same old stuff, bud. You can find me over at Collider.com covering games for the most part, and also a little bit of animation here and there. You can follow up with me on Twitter at DrClawMD. And if you're looking for that summer beach read while you're social distancing, check out The Science of Breaking Bad from MIT Press, available on Amazon. What's new with you, bud?
Oh, man. I would typically say, as always, I do live improv comedy.
But you don't.
With a group that's called Nox. But that's when we're not in a pandemic. We actually are doing shows over the internet that stream on Facebook Live. So you can check them out. I think the next one that we have a couple that are coming up in July. You can find all the information about Nox through Washington Improv Theater. They are witdc.org to check out more information on them. As always, I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Sean Paul Ellis, as well as also we are wrapping up the second season of the improvised comedy podcast that I do, which is called The Bureau. You can check out The Bureau. It has notable guests from this show, such as Jamal Newman, as well as also Isabel Galbraith. You can find that anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Just search for The Bureau. We're at the FBI. We're in a break room, and we're doing a podcast. That's the conceit. You'll have fun. For this little show, Saturday morning cartoons. Want to support us? Oh my God, you're like the nicest human in the world. Thank you so much. Go over to our Patreon. Just go and search Saturday morning cartoons on Patreon. Just remember it's morning with a U. Everybody loves to remind us that it's probably the wrong spelling. It's not.
Even both local and state governments.
Yep. That's how that works. It's very weird. If you don't want to support us on Patreon, we totally get it. But you can also just simply tell a friend, because we don't understand how Apple iTunes and reviews. If you want to go on Apple iTunes and reviews, we'd super appreciate that. But also, we just appreciate if you tell a friend. Tell somebody that you think likes cartoons that would want to listen to this. Have them submit a recommendation for us to listen to. You can slide into our DMs on Twitter at MorningTunes. Just remember, it's morning with a U. Check us out on Instagram and Facebook, Saturday Morning Cartoons, and drop us an old-fashioned email, saturdaymorningcartoons@gmail.com. You can find everything that we've talked about in the link tree, which is in the bio for all of our social media sites. And as always, you can listen to us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, anywhere fine podcasts are sold. Thank you so much, Jesse, for submitting for this. We super appreciate it. We'll probably be back with another user recommendation, because we know a lot of you have called in and left us messages. So
some of them threatening.
Yeah. So keep it up.
Ease up, guys, or keep it up. Either one.
Settle down, but also keep it up.
Find that happy medium.
Yeah. Wherever that is. That's what we're targeting here.
Threaten us kindly. Show. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Threaten us with love. That's it from us, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, everybody. Thanks a lot for listening to Saturday Morning Cartoons. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to transform and roll out.